Hello everyone, Alistair Gold here. I honestly have no words. I do. I do have words. I have lots of words. But in this exact moment, I'm just struggling to comprehend Tottenham Hotspur. I've said it so many times and I will probably say it for many, many, many years to come if it doesn't see me off this mortal coil. Tottenham Hotspur, what a club. I was settling down to do this video far earlier tonight, but I thought, you know what? I know that the Juventus appeal as a hearing was going on with the Italian Football Federation. And I thought, you know what? I'll just check in case the verdict goes in any kind of way that might affect Tottenham. I don't know why I even doubted that it might. I must stress, I'm not laughing at the thing itself. Of course, it's all very serious stuff. I'm just laughing at the fact that just every day there seems to be something to do with Tottenham Hotspur just not having a normal day. In the past, I used to cover non-league clubs way back many years ago that had all kinds of weird stuff going on. The strangest stories I would know. Many of them I couldn't even write about. Honestly, they don't hold a candle to Tottenham Hotspur and what I've had to kind of report on over since January. When did I start? No, not January. Summer of 2016, technically. Honestly, within such a short space of time, the most abnormal, unexpected, unusual things happen. I put out a GIF on Twitter earlier, which actually made me laugh as I put it up. It was, I think it's from a film, maybe The Babadook or something like that. It's a mother shouting at her son, "Why can't you just be normal?" And him in the backseat screaming and kicking his legs back at her. And that just really feels like my relationship with Tottenham Hotspur. It really does, and I'm sure many of you share those sentiments. And now, of course, because I've waited for all of that, and then I've waited for the verdict, waited for the aftermath, still trying to get a comment out of Tottenham. So if that comes during the course of this video, I shall obviously try to pop it in there, as it were. So I'm recording this very late at night, which means it's going to either go out very late at night or I might just hold on to it till the morning. We'll see how we go. But you can probably see I'm knackered. So obviously in Manchester, working away very late last night, got the train back from Manchester this morning, and then yes, I was hoping for a normal evening, which never ever happened. So if you've completely missed this evening, what's happened is Juventus have been docked 15 points following an investigation into the club's past transfer dealings, and that's come through the Italy's Football Federation, which is the FIGC. Originally, they were acquitted in an investigation in April 2022, and the investigation concerned revenues from player registration rights. Essentially, Juventus were accused of fixing their balance sheets by artificial gains from club transfers. It's quite a complicated thing. There's talk in the investigation about allegations that values were inflated, things like this. That's what it all was. But that was they were acquitted originally, and it was reopened December 2022. And this kind of process was part of appeal to try and get the original, charges brought back against them. The acquittal revoked, essentially. So as it came out, the verdict was that it should stand, this revocation. Is that the right word? The acquittal. Juventus has been docked 15 points. Various members of staff have been handed bans, and then among them, Fabio Paratici, who you might know because he's Tottenham's managing director of football. So the sanctions that the FIGC's Court of Appeal have dispersed to him are a 30-month temporary ban from carrying out any activities within the Italian Football Federation, and they've requested for an extension within UEFA and FIFA for that. So that means currently it's anything to do with, well, that would run through the Italian Football Federation. But obviously, if UEFA and FIFA agree to extending it wide, globally, well, it does what it says on the tin. It would be everything. Juventus have announced that they're going to appeal. They're obviously everything to do with them. So we shall see. I'm intrigued to see what Tottenham put out, if anything. It's a difficult one because obviously all of this happened before, or alleged to have happened before, Paratici arrived at the club. So technically whether they have to give a comment, I don't know. Whether it's just something personally he has to put out there, I'm not sure. But like I say, if by the end of this video that arrives, any comment or anything, I shall let you know. But yeah, we'll have to see. We'll have to see what UEFA and FIFA do. And then obviously we'll know from there exactly how this affects Paratici and Tottenham, really. Yeah, because obviously, although Spurs have nothing to do with it, you know, it obviously associates them with him if this is not overturned in any kind of appeal. I think, but I'm not entirely sure, but I think there's a possibility that if there's an appeal, those sentences can't, or those what they're called, sanctions can't be negotiated or lessened. I think that's the way it works. And I think actually the prosecutors asked for, I think it was 20 months originally, maybe 20 months and 10 days or something. And the verdict ended up being stronger than the prosecutors actually asked for, from what I could tell. So yeah, we have to wait to see exactly what that means, and whether, if there is an appeal, that prevents any of it from kicking in immediately. Certainly the points deduction appears to be set to kick in this season, because Juventus mentioned that in their statement. I think it knocks them down from 3rd place to 10th place in Serie A. But yeah, obviously we need to know how it's going to affect Paratici first. We need to get some further clarification on exactly whether it's going to become a global ban or not, and what the appeals process means, because if it were to stand, and if it were to stand globally, it's a complete mess for Tottenham. And I don't really understand how he'd then be able to work for Spurs anymore, really. I don't even know how that would work. So yeah, that's a bridge we'll have to cross when we know a little bit more. If there's any more that comes out of this weekend, and there's any further stuff, then I'll do a little kind of companion video to try and explain things. But yeah, this was not how I expected to spend my Friday evening after a manic couple of days anyway. So yeah, that's Tottenham Hotspur. And ironically, I was going to talk about Fabio Paratici a little bit later. It was already kind of planned in my notes and everything about the way Spurs have used him thus far. So I will still talk to him, but obviously we'll be adding the massive caveat now of all of this. So yeah, right. Let's talk about the match. Do you know what? It's like that's kind of faded into my back, like the back of my mind now with everything else, which is mad. It was like a 6-goal madness of a game at the Etihad Stadium last night, where I genuinely thought at half-time, oh my goodness, Spurs are actually going to do this. I don't know why I gave myself hope, because it was extinguished cruelly by a combination of Tottenham and Manchester City in the second half. I made Conte laugh. Conte was a bit funny with me in the pre-match press conference, a little bit spiky. To be fair, it wasn't just me. Sky had already wound him up, so it was a bit spiky with them. And then with another question, I think it was from Premier League Productions as well. So people that really, are there to kind of ask just kind of, what's the best way to put it? Just very much questions about the match. It was a bit prickly with them, and then I got a little bit as well. But for some unknown reason last night, he decided it was going to have a bit of a chuckle. And because I put it to him first off, I said, all season we've been talking about awful first halves, really good second halves trying to come back. I said, why are we talking tonight about a match that had a terrific first half and an absolutely dreadful second half? And he actually started laughing. He was like, I don't know. He's like, you can just see, he's a bit like me now. He was kind of losing it. He didn't really kind of know even what to do with that. Because this is a thing. In that first half last night, if you're watching this on Saturday morning, which you very well maybe, it's 2 nights ago, Spurs did everything asked of them in that first half. They defended well. It was only right at the end of the half where Hugo Lloris made a couple of really good saves. That was pretty much the only time City managed to get through. They quietened down the crowd, and then they counter-attacked at the other end and scored some really good kind of, counter-attacking goals through Dejan Kulusevski and then Emerson Royal. A rare but very welcome Emerson Royal goal. So that first half, honestly, it was really, really good from Spurs. I saw some people afterwards saying it wasn't. I think people are just in an angry mode right now. I understand people's frustrations, but to say that first half wasn't really well executed tactically and also by the players and the way they played, and Conte referred to it afterwards, they were a bit braver, they had more of the possession and everything. But yeah, that it was all going so well. And what was quite funny was that I mentioned that he was a bit spiky with me in the press conference before. I had 2 questions in that pre-match press conference I asked. The first one was about the pressing. And it's something you've heard me speak about in these videos. It's something that I've written about many times. How I don't understand why this season Spurs seem to press for about 10 minutes, then drop back really deep, and then, second half maybe up the pressing a little bit more. And actually, it wasn't a dig at him, my question. If anything, I was kind of giving him an opportunity to say, which I'm sure he said before, that he doesn't ask the players to drop deep, but they do. And so I said to him that the question was pretty much what I've just said. But then I said, because I saw you in the second half, I did at one point against Arsenal, calling Matt Doherty to push up, press, and he was telling him to do it. So I said, I saw that. So, is there a reason that you can think of that they're dropping back? And so essentially, I think I stumbled upon the fact that it's kind of what Conte is asking them to do. Because he wasn't happy with the question. And he essentially, you could tell, when Conte's angry with you, he uses words that I think he's actually applying to you as a questioner or interrogator, as a journalist, I guess. So, it will use the word stupid and stuff. It's like, he's going to say, you're stupid. And he did. He said something about, when you're up against players like Saka and Martinelli and who else did he say? I can't remember what else he said. I think he was talking about Foden, Grealish. Actually, he was talking about City, weirdly, which makes no sense as well. We'll talk about it in a minute. And he said, it would be stupid to press that high up the pitch and leave that much room behind. I was like, okay, Antonio, okay. And the other one was I asked him about Richarlison, and I said, does him now coming back as an option, is that a good thing for Sonny? Because for Son, maybe that gives him that little spark of competition, fires him up. We saw what happened against, I was going to say Juventus, they're in the brain now, Leicester, when he was came off the bench and obviously scored a hat-trick and he was fantastic. So I said, maybe does it give him, it's not a kick up the backside, but just that little, puts a fire underneath him if to say, if you don't perform now, you will come out of the starting lineup. And it's that little bit of a threat, I guess, a bit of worry. He did not take that question very well either. He was just in a bad mood. And he started to come out with something saying that, you've asked the opposite before. You've said, is Richarlison a bad thing for Son? First off, and this has got, you can't see this on the videos. The whole time he's saying that back to me, I'm going, nope. Because I've never asked that question. And I don't remember. Because it was one of those where maybe other journalists were saying maybe he meant you, the media in general. None of us can remember that being asked. Unless it was in a presser that I wasn't in. I don't see why Richarlison coming would be a bad thing for something. I mean, obviously you could say less game time, but I don't think that's the kind of question we'd ask as journalists. It doesn't make sense as a question. So yeah, he was like, you asked me this, and then you asked the complete opposite, and he was properly going off on one. But yeah, sorry, the point of telling that story was the fact that he was saying, pressing, yeah, that would be mad to do that. And he mentioned Foden, Mahrez, Grealish, all of these people. And then he went to Man City and played a really high pressing game for most of the match. They dropped deep a couple of times, but even he admitted afterwards they pressed far more than they have been in other games. So, yeah, thanks, Antonio, for saying everything about that back to me as if I was like, stupid. I probably don't even have to do that, stupid. And yet then going and doing exactly what I'd said. But there you go. They pressed really well. Rodrigo Bentancur is a massive part of that pressing. I'm going to have a bit of a kind of a how do I put this? A loving talk. That sounds really weird. I'm going to say nice things about Rodrigo Bentancur because he was superb. He was absolutely brilliant. And this is the problem: is that everything they did good or did well in that second half. Even my language skills are going. Everything they did well in that first half, in the second half, they came out, and it's just those individual errors killed them. And, you know, I criticised Conte in the last video for some of the stuff against Arsenal and little bits and pieces. I've got no real criticism at all for this game. I felt everything that Spurs did badly was individual mistakes, and there's nothing he can do about that. You just can't. You can't. I guess you can pick different players, but still, once they're out there on the pitch, and we're going to talk about it, these are experienced players. You know, even Perisic, 3 mistakes leading to 3 goals. Hugo Lloris, a couple as well, although he doesn't admit they were mistakes, which we'll come to in a little bit. And Spurs just folded. It was really sad. It reminded me a little bit of, do you remember back in the late Villas-Boas days / Tim Sherwood days when they would come up against a big side, they would concede once and just go, it was like, honestly, a deck of cards absolutely going. And this was what it felt like again. It was a bit like, oh, step back in time kind of thing. Although Perisic did have a massive chance at 2-2, which might have taken the game in a different direction. But it was not to be. Yeah, so Conte quotes. He's got a little laugh at the start when I'd said that. He kind of laughed and he's like, put his hands over his face like this. He said, yeah, it's strange because in the last period, the question was, why is the first half poor and you wait until the second half to change the situation? Yeah, but I think that I have to analyse very well the game. If I have to compare this game with the game we played last season, I think we played much better today. The performance was, he was talking about the 3-2 back in February when Spurs won. The performance was good today because we played with personality. We created a lot of problems for Manchester City. I remember very well last season that we played for a long period in our box to defend the result. Then 1, 2, 3 counter-attacks. No. And then he kind of corrected himself. He did this a few times. I think he was as knackered as I am. And we're going to talk about him being a bit knackered, I think, as well later. He said 1, 2, 3 counters. No, actually, 1 counter-attack. And then we started from the back, from the goalkeeper to build from the back, and we scored the other 2 goals. Today we were really brave to press high, and we scored 2 goals this way. I think last season we were a bit lucky, and this season, today, when the result was 2-2, we had a massive, massive chance to score. I think if you go up again 3-2, I don't know how the result would have finished because the game changed totally under the mental aspect. Then, if you ask me, compared to last season, we're conceding a lot more goals. A lot. It's not good. And to concede 4 goals in one half, the second half, this is the first time in my career that one of my teams has conceded so many goals. We have to continue to work and we have to continue to improve and to try to do our best. We're really disappointed for the final result because we could deserve much more in the end. Antonio likes to remind us that Spurs are giving him unwanted firsts in his career. They have a habit of that with many a manager. Do you know what? I think he's right. I do think Spurs were braver this time. I agree completely on that. And do you know what? There were some moments which unfortunately will get lost in the sands of time. The result will overrule their existence. But there were some moments where I remember turning to Guesty. I was sat with him and I said, the passing to get out of elements of the City press was fantastic. I don't know if it came across on the TV as well, but there were moments when Spurs looked really penned in, and I do think this is the Bentancur factor. they just passed it amongst themselves really well and spread up the pitch. Honestly, it was terrific football, and it's just such a shame that the defensive collapse and the individual errors absolutely will have ruled any of that out, because they looked really confident on the ball. They were passing as if they weren't worried about these £100 million players coming towards them, honestly. It was really good. And you look at the stats, back in February, when Spurs won 3-2, they had just 29% of the possession that night. Thursday night, last night, they had 42%. So obviously way more even in that regard. In February, they had 6 shots on goal and not a single corner, not one. Whereas last night, 9 shots at goal and 3 corners. But unfortunately, it's all about the goals that they conceded. So 4 goals. They are conceding far, far too many goals at the moment. And that's the problem. I think the 4 goals really do dictate that, yes, it was a braver performance, but that means it wasn't, in fact, a better one, in my mind. Because, yes, there were so many good moments, but I think the individual errors, unfortunately, just dragged it beneath the other performance, because ultimately they held on in that one, and they conceded half the amount of goals and scored 1 more. So, for me, yeah, I get what he's saying. It seems to be a little bit of a theme at the moment, which I don't know how much the Spurs fans like, of being told that it was a good performance. But on this one, I would agree with it, I think. Less so in the Arsenal one, but this one, I would agree that it was a good performance from everything else bar the individual errors. But like I say, that cancels everything out anyway, really. So, yeah. And then he tied himself up a little bit with me. What happened with... That sounded dodgy. That's not what I mean. The press conference was strange. Remember, was it last week? Yeah, it was the Arsenal one. I said to you that they had the press conference afterwards, and I just asked the first question, which is a generic one, which I never like asking. And no one else... Well, there was 2 more questions and it ended, and I was really disappointed because I wanted to ask more, but felt I needed to give other people a chance that didn't take their chance. So I was determined to make up for this. And essentially, if you watch the press conference back, the first 3 questions are all me. Because I just thought, well, stuff it. I'm just going to keep asking questions. And then maybe I'll let some other people have a go. And yeah, he got himself tied up a few times in different knots. There was one moment when he claimed that you cannot buy experience. Then he laughed and said, yeah, actually, that's not right. You can buy experience. Then he started to tell me that if Spurs had more experience, they would never lose that match. So I had to point out to him, this is the thing, when they say these things, you kind of do have to counter them. And I always try to if there's an opportunity. And so when he's saying that they would never lose that experience, I say, well, Antonio, wait a second. Your 33-year-old Croatian, even Perisic, was responsible for 3 of the 4 goals. And obviously also Hugo Lloris, 36-year-old World Cup winning goalkeeper, had some iffy moments as well. And I'd actually say, I'm going to talk about it in a bit, I thought Eric Dyer had another shaky game as well. And the final goal came from a Clement Longley. Dreadful mistake, terrible touch. And he's 27-year-old Barcelona player, played for France. I'm sorry, but all the experienced players kind of let the side down, if anything. Not all of them, but, all the players that did have a bit of a mare on the day were experienced players. So, yeah, I kind of had to call him on that. It wasn't me being I was going to say a bad word there. It wasn't me trying to be deliberately annoying to him, especially after, him being a bit irritated with me in the Tuesday presser. It was just pointing out the fact that it didn't really make any sense. So I asked him about the individual errors. I just said, what can you do that? Because obviously you can't influence them on the pitch when they're going to make mistakes. And he said, we're really disappointed because many times you have to justify the goals that we are conceding. For sure, this is a period we're not so lucky because we're making many mistakes. But football is this. Sometimes you have a positive performance. Sometimes you're in situations that are not so positive, but we have to continue to work and believe in ourselves. As I said in the past, this type of game with more experience, you never lose. You don't buy experience. And then you could hear him. You could see him hearing his own words in his head, and he started to laugh. And he said, "Well, you can buy experience. You can buy it, but you know very well that we have to buy experience step by step, year by year. For this reason, when I speak and I tell you we have just started the process to try to become competitive, it means that we're also working under this aspect because a team with experience never concedes 4 goals." So that was the point that I went, really? And I said, pointed out it was experience that actually caused the errors on that day, on the night. And he kind of paused for a moment and he responded, and because I've specifically named Perisic as one of the examples of that, I think he was like, "Ooh, I'm not going to criticise him kind of individually." And he said, "Yeah, but I don't like to go about the single player, but for sure, when we concede 4 goals, the first person responsible is the coach. Then the players, because I don't put the mistakes on my players. The mistake, first of all, is mine, because it means that maybe we have to work defensively more to be more compact. Like the whole team, not only the defenders, because when we concede a goal, it means the whole team, not only the defenders, the keeper, or a single player." I thought it was quite interesting that he named the keeper there as well. Clearly knew that I also meant Lloris. So yeah, I think that was fair. I think that was fair for me to kind of point that out on him, because it didn't really make sense. Because Perisic did a bit of a stinker. He did. You'll have heard me praise Perisic a lot going forward. I think, 8 assists? I think in terms of that, he's been a really good free transfer, honestly. He really has. And I'm sure behind the scenes as well, he's been a kind of a big driving kind of voice of experience in a dressing room. However, I think it's fair to say that defensively, the Premier League has probably proved to be one of his most tougher leagues to adapt to. Obviously, he's a bit older as well, so he may have lost a slight yard of the pace. But I do find that whenever he comes up with an attack against an attacker with even a modicum of pace, he struggles. And this was why, kind of part of my reasoning for not understanding why people were so kind of, I have to say, abusive to Sessegnon, that I saw online as well. More so criticising the decision before the game, because for me, he's always picked Sess in the big games, and it is because of that bit of extra pace that he has over Perisic in dealing with these faster players. I know, obviously, it's not going to work all the time, but the only difference between the February game and this one was Sessegnon. That starting 11. Sess played really well. He had a very tactically disciplined game, and he got a lot of praise afterwards from Conte as well. So that's why he will play. Just Perisic is a nightmare with Mahrez. Honestly, he will have gone to bed that night having nightmares about Riyad Mahrez, because every time Mahrez went at him, pretty much, he beat him. First goal, he just kind of breezed past him like he wasn't there. Second goal, he got in behind him, didn't need to head the ball across. It was kind of poor tracking or picking him up from Perisic as well. And then the third one was just a complete kind of bodge up from Perisic. It was like trying to take the ball away. He got it stuck under his foot, got tackled, and Mahrez just ran up and fired it in at the near post, which shouldn't have gone in as well. And then, of course, Perisic had the big chance at the other end where it's a difficult one. It's one of those we just tried to get it on target. They were all at sea, the City defence. I think it was Kulusevski got to the byline, pulled it back. It went all the way to the back post. And he just tried to get it on target. I'm trying to remember who it hit now, whether it was Rico Lewis. I'm trying to remember who it was now. But it hit a City player and bounced and hit the post. And yeah, that was a big, big moment. And pretty much not long after City's third goal, Conte hooked him. He went off Perisic and Sess replaced him. Yeah, it wasn't Perisic's day, but he wasn't alone. I did think Hugo is difficult. The spotlight was really on him. And first half, I thought, he made a terrific low save. It was a really strong-wristed save. Came out to deny Haaland and a one-on-one really well. And it was like, okay, all right, excellent. We're kind of fighting back against the critics. And then he had an iffy moment just before the break when he kind of rushed out, missed a cross, I think it was, coming out. I'm trying to remember, it was a set piece. I think it was a cross. and Haaland headed it over. So fortunately, nothing came of it, but it almost was a bit of a precursor for what was to come. I mean, I'm less... He got a lot of flack for the second goal. I'd say I'd be more annoyed at the third goal. Second goal, he kind of came out, tried to get a connection on the ball, and didn't really get enough on it. It was during a bit of a scramble. It's always quite difficult for keepers. But the third goal for me, you shouldn't be beating at your near post. Whether there's a little deflection or whatever, that ball should not be squeezing between you and your post. I thought that was one of those where it's basic goalkeeping gone a bit wrong. And he actually stopped in the mix. I know there was a bit of criticism about why he didn't talk or anything. There can be so many reasons for why players don't talk to the media afterwards. It can be anything. It could be that the club just don't put them up. It could be that they're off doing the random, like they do random drug tests sometimes as well, Premier League or whatever competitions. It can be anything. So, I didn't read too much into that, but he did stop yesterday. Spoke to Dan Kilpatrick from the Standard, and he said Dan just went kind of straight to him and asked him about the mistakes and stuff, and also asked him about, is it a byproduct of coming back so quickly from the World Cup? He obviously played in the World Cup final. He was back on the bench at Spurs 6 days later, wasn't it, I think? So he said, I can't complain. You're a professional and you just follow a rhythm. But obviously when you're involved with the national team and you go until the last day of the World Cup, you come back and you miss mental freshness, but you need to get back on track and help your team. And then when he was talking about the mistakes, he said, when you look at the Arsenal goal, I can be in a good position, but the deflection hit the ball on my chest, and with the spin, it goes over the line. It's something that even if I wanted to do on purpose, I can't. Even against City, when you look at the third goal, a deflection makes the ball go over my knee. At any moment, I try to anticipate, just setting and waiting. There are a lot of things like that happening to our team. It's a period where we need to stick together, keep working, and hopefully bring the luck back. It's a difficult one. On one side, I think the fans will be annoyed that he's not taking responsibility. On the other side, I would say as a goalkeeper, he would have analysed those over and over and over again. So I'd imagine he's looked at those and seen that there was some deviation in the flight of the ball that suddenly changed it, and his reaction didn't quite make it. Only from personal experience, having spoken to Hugo in the past, he's quite honest. Quite honest. He's an honest man. So I'd imagine if he genuinely did feel that there was a mistake made and the goalkeepers had analysed it, his coach and everything had found that, I think he would have admitted it. It doesn't detract from the fact that it looked like a complete and utter gaffe, a mistake. Yes, I also agree that, still near post, but, he's saying it's a deflection that takes it over his knee, but it's really difficult because then you get into the area of, are his reflexes as fast as they used to be? I could be massively casting aspersions there upon him because there are other moments when we see his reflections and reflexes, and they're incredible. So, yeah, I don't know. I'll leave that to you guys to take what you want from him. He also was talking about the mentality of the team and whether, obviously with the second half and the collapse, he said, on the mentality, there's nothing to say. When you look at the guys working every day, we can't blame anyone. Probably we have a lack of consistency in our performances. I believe we struggle a bit to play 90 to 95 minutes at our best. Things we were able to do last season, especially in the last 2 or 3 months. But the most important period is ahead of us. February, March, April and May is where you play for everything, and it's important going forward to get our level back and everyone to finish the season strongly, hopefully. So that's another experienced player. And this is the problem for me. For all Conte's talk of experience, I feel like in recent games, the younger players that have had a chance, like Sarr and Hill, have come on and they've done well. And actually, it's been the experienced players that you would really expect to carry your team through some tough moments. I kind of feel they're the ones that have been letting the team down. And, again, Eric Dyer turned 29 this week. I thought he looked shaky at the back after the break. I thought he started quite well, did a good flying block to deny someone. I can't remember who it was, but it was a really good flying block. I remember him doing that. And look, like Lloris, under Conte and Nuno before him, Dyer had a really consistent season last season. Him and Lloris both had probably maybe their most consistent seasons in years. But this season, Dyer, he's started the season well, but he's kind of slipped back to some of his old ways in concentration lapses, getting caught out of position as he's trying to cover for others when he maybe shouldn't do that. And his confidence must have taken a hit with that as well. I think my biggest problem is that it doesn't feel like there's a leader in the back line. I know Lloris is like behind that back line, but I just always feel that in the middle of your back line you need an absolute organizer type, a real loud, controlling voice who everyone looks to, kind of guess with utter respect, I suppose, maybe. I don't know if that's the right word, but just someone that they will do anything for that player. And I just don't know whether Eric Dyer is that player. Like I say, he's got all the potential to be a very good centre-back, and every manager he's had has said he could be one of the best in the world, some of them have said. But I just don't think, other than that one season as a centre-back last season, I don't think as a centre-back he's really had a full, consistently excellent season. And I think we're getting to the point where it's probably too late to to realise that potential that all these managers have said about him. And the problem is he's not kind of developing into a leader of the team. He's a very clever guy, very clever indeed, very well read. But I just don't know whether I'm seeing him as the leader to steady the ship. I just don't know if I see it. I hope I'm wrong, and I hope that with even more maturity, maybe in his 30s, he develops into that kind of character, but I just can't quite see it on the pitch yet. And I think the fact that they're leaking goals aplenty, it's no coincidence that they've got no one just taking a firm grip of that back line. They just don't really. It's not just the back, to be fair. Sonny up front. Sonny. The Etihad was the place where he was maybe feared more than anywhere. Sonny, it didn't matter whether Kane was playing, whoever was playing. Even if Kane wasn't there, Son was the main man at the Etihad. Sorry, even if Kane was there, Son was the main man at the Etihad. Manchester City players would fear him. The way he flies at defences. Last night, there was just none of that. He wasn't going full throttle at people. He wasn't, when the ball was around the area, he was not taking the shots I expected him to take. He would sometimes just pass the ball off to someone else. It's just confidence. It's so low at the moment. I think he's playing safe balls rather than trying things. And the problem is because he's not doing some of the runs that he would normally do, those bursting runs. And I think that's also taking one of the weapons away from Harry Kane. Because Harry Kane, we know, would drop deep, look up, bang, see Sonny going. And he would play that ball through. And there were a few occasions when I think he looked up and Sonny hadn't made the run. Sonny just stayed a little bit safer. Maybe more compact. It could be instructions, I don't know. But it wasn't there, that ball. And I think we've seen Kane be dispossessed a few times recently because he's maybe got a lack of movement ahead of him. And I actually felt on the day that probably Kulusevski was the main man, was the most dangerous Spurs attacking threat, really, in what he did. Obviously scored the goal. Nice kind of low finish with the loose ball. I do think he was the main one. He feels like he's taking a lot of the creative work on his shoulders right now. Kane is still contributing. Kane obviously has got a terrific goal total this season. I must admit, I didn't think we'd get to this stage and he still hadn't joined Jimmy Greaves as the top goal scorer. I thought we would have seen that either against Portsmouth, Arsenal or City. So I'm a little bit surprised that hasn't happened yet. But I do still think he's not quite the player he has been in recent seasons. I don't think he's hit his form, his peak at all yet. Hopefully that's to come. But yeah, attacking wise, I mean, Richarlison still looks rusty. Obviously, understandable. although Rodrigo Bentancur slightly makes a mockery of kind of the whole rust thing, the way he was yesterday. Brian Hill picked up a little knock in training, which is why he was missing. And of course, Lucas Moura still out. It's really difficult. And obviously, it looks like his Tottenham time's coming to an end because Spurs have let that option lapse at the end of last month to extend his contract by 12 months. I saw a link with Everton this week, which I was teasing Guesty slightly about because Lucas is injured. You know, especially with the troubles that Everton have got right now, signing an injured player would be a bit of a strange one. But yeah, it just kind of shows they need another attacker to come in the door. They really haven't got the options right now that they need. One more attacker, I think, would do the job for now. Thank goodness for Rodrigo Bentancur. Honestly, I thought he was magnificent. This is, Rodrigo Bentancur Appreciation Society time. Get your laminated membership cards out. It is absolutely time for a loving all about that Uruguayan. Oh my goodness. It was like he'd never been away. That is the biggest compliment I can give to his fitness levels, the way he's worked in the last couple of weeks. Just to get himself in shape to be able to play 74, 75 minutes of this match at full throttle. And, me talking about Richarlison looking rusty, Bentancur looked like the same player that steps off the pitch against Leeds for Spurs. He was instrumental. He is the missing piece in Tottenham's play. They look so much calmer when he's on the ball, so much more composed, especially obviously first half. Second half, there's not much he can do about someone who's giving the ball away on the left, but he was just so good. The real shining light for me in the Manchester gloom. Yeah, he was excellent. I love watching him play football. Bear in mind, 6 weeks he's been out, a little tear in his adductor muscle for Argentina, Uruguay at the World Cup. He just drives Spurs back into games they've got no right to be in. That's what he's been doing all season. He sets the tone, the way he presses, he harasses opponents. He's got a bit of Moussa Dembele-like on the ball. You can pass him the ball in tight situations and he'll pirouette. He's got a brilliant radar for knowing where everyone is around him. But then also he's got an ability to close down people and quite an aggressive, but not quite like a Romero style. He's not going to absolutely plough through you to get the ball. He's just going to get straight up in your face and cause a problem, which is exactly what he did for the first goal. Caused City to give the ball away to Kulusevski, who fired it back home. And then you saw the other side of him was going, strong order there. The other side of him, when he got the ball in the midfield, he could see he was going to get clattered, but he played it. He kind of shielded the ball, took the hit while he was playing a perfect ball through, and obviously that led to eventually was Kane having the shot pushed out, and Emerson headed it over. As one of the Spurs press officers sat behind me remarked, that's exactly like Peter Crouch's goal. Callum, one of the press officers, remarked it was like Peter Crouch's goal, the one that got Spurs Champions League qualification at it was against City, wasn't it? Was it at the it was the Etihad then, wasn't it? Of course it was. Although it wasn't called the Etihad then, if I remember. If I'm thinking the right time, or am I? I don't know. It's not important. Bentancur, absolutely superb. He's got that it reminds me of Neo in The Matrix, when he's doing all of that. But everything around him is slowing down far kind of more than he is, and he's able to almost operate at normal speed after that. That's what Bentancur's like. He just makes everything go at his pace, yet springs Spurs away really quickly. And he's got that thing where, I've said this before, where Kane isn't quite able, I don't think, to press, or is instructed not to press quite as aggressively as he used to. Could be a fitness thing, could be an injury-related thing from the past that he doesn't want to aggravate anything. But you just see, like a freight train, Bentancur run through the middle and be that focal point in the middle. And he makes other people play better around him. Like I say, a lot of those passing moves around the press I felt came from Bentancur taking charge, and then others raised their confidence levels. I think Højbjerg plays a lot better when he's alongside him as well. He knows he doesn't have to kind of come across. He doesn't have to, like I say, with Eric Dyer, he doesn't feel he has to come across to cover gaps and spaces. He trusts that Bentancur is so super fit that when he gets up the pitch, he'll be back in place very, very quickly. And yeah, 6 weeks out, honestly. He made a mockery of all of that. Conte said he was knackered afterwards. He said he and Kulusevski were both absolutely shattered. Obviously, Kulusevski's second start, wasn't it? And Bentancur's first. And was it his second start? Yeah, it was, wasn't it? Yeah, he came back for Arsenal. Kulusevski. Yeah, and Bentancur, yeah, back and did really well, but he's a bit knackered. Hopefully, you'd think, what was it, Thursday to Monday night, I think everything possible they'll get him to recover for that Fulham game, because he's that instrumental to the team. And you just cast your mind back, it's almost a year ago to that deadline day they got Kulusevski and Bentancur. I mean, the Bentancur deal, I had to relook at the numbers because I still couldn't believe it. 15.8 million Spurs got him for, payable within 3 financial years, with up to £5 million more on top if specific performance objectives are met during his time at Spurs. I looked back as well. When he joined Spurs on that day, he was asked what he would bring to the club, to which he said, "I would say I'm a very tactical player who covers free spaces, does well when winning the ball back and moves it forward quickly. I also think I have scope to improve even more, and I can do so as part of this team at Spurs. I'm looking forward to learning from Antonio Conte. I think he's a great coach. He wants to win and gets 150% out of his players. I think he'll make me improve even more, both mentally and as a player. I like that, and it's a big motivation for me." Antonio Conte will love the fact that he uses 150%. Conte is very much a man who likes to give you numbers over 100%, even though technically that doesn't make any sense. But I know some people use that expression. But he has improved, Bentancur. This is the thing. I was saying this last week. He is probably the one player that I will definitely, without doubt, say that I think Conte has improved. He is. I think he's the one that I don't think you can really argue against. Because yes, he came in and made an immediate impact, but I think the player he is a year on is still far better than that player he was. But yeah, and I do wonder. I was wondering this week. I kind of wrote it in my piece as well, that the more respect he gets within the team and the more responsibility he's handed as well, I wonder whether he ends up becoming captain material. I do wonder that. Because they really, you could see the respect they've got for him. Lolo, as he's called. Yeah, you can see he's a very good player. Very good player. But I think the key to it all, thinking back to that January transfer window, is just how important it is that they repeat it. If they can find 2 players of similar calibre, honestly, really, really, really need another window like that, or just the last day would be acceptable. Because if you think I look slightly knackered doing this now, right at the end of the night, it's approaching midnight. Antonio Conte, he also looked a bit knackered on Thursday. Thursday night. I'm losing my days now. If you watch it back, especially my first question, it may just be that he was answering questions from me, but he was like, he's talking and stuff like that. He looks shattered. He looks like he's really experienced Tottenham Hotspur. The full experience that we have had for years. He's kind of getting a bit of a concentrated dose of the Tottenham Hotspur experience. Like I say, bit spiky in the pre-match one. And he had this, he was kind of teed up for a little bit. The question was, should the hierarchy of clubs be put out there to talk about big decisions, or club strategy? Would it be helpful to you if, the chairman was more communicative, and of course, he absolutely leapt on it. It was like a release valve. It's like, yes, kind of thing. Because in Italy, it is, as he rightly says, it's a big thing there. That's what they do. Paratici, who we've obviously spoken a fair bit about already, would speak every single week, pretty much, to Sky Sport Italia ahead of games. And a lot of the kind of sporting directors and everything would do that when they're in the Italian league. It's not something that I know it's obviously definitely not a thing in England. We know that. I don't know whether it's such a big thing in other countries outside Italy. I don't know. I must admit, I don't see enough of their pre-match media stuff to know. But everything I see still seems to be press conferences with the coaches. I'm sure there's probably slightly more from sporting directors and types like that. But yeah, I don't make Conte wrong in that regard. I think, if there was ever a club that needs to be dragged out of the shadows, it's Tottenham, and have their kind of powers that be connect a little bit more with the fans than they do. Just connect slightly would be a start. You've heard me speak about this before, but many a manager has been kind of prodded out in front of the cameras and like, you talk about it. The worst or the best example, however you want to look at it, is poor old Ryan Mason. 29 years old, first ever day as a manager, caretaker manager. Spurs essentially shoved him out into the way of the camera to talk about the Super League shambles. I felt so sorry for him on that day, even though I was among those kind of asking the questions. I just felt so sorry for him. He had to talk because nobody else would. It's just, yeah. And Paratici, it looked like he was going to change all of that, because the idea was that he was going to come in and be a voice, a face of the board. Like I say, you might know some of the names of other people on the board. They might only be names to you. Some of them you probably have never even heard of, because we never even hear from them. They aren't people that really talk. And obviously that really applies to Daniel Levy as well. But the thing was, Paratici, I think, was meant to come in and be this voice. And what do we get? Twice a year? Yeah, twice a year kind of transfer window raps. That's not him, spitting some bars out. It's literally him discussing what's gone on in the transfer window. And in some, I think there was once they were a bit lacking in content. Maybe it was, I can't remember. There was a reason for it, and I think they got him on there and he spoke. It might have even been from a cafe in Italy or something, I vaguely remember. But yeah, it was not. He's not been used in the way I think everyone expected him to be. And when he has appeared, it's been on like club channels. He hasn't been put out there in the media. Some more cynical than I that might suggest they're more interested in keeping what he's got to say on their own channels or streaming service they now have than actually getting a clearer message out to a wider audience by putting them out to the media. I mean, he did the one press conference, which was because Conte couldn't do it. Looks like that comment is not going to come tonight from Spurs, unfortunately. But yeah, so obviously now, having seen what's happened, we can kind of understand, and knowing some of the stuff that's been going on and in terms of the investigations rumbling on, I guess you can understand why maybe it wouldn't have been the best idea for him to be chucked in front of the media. But I suppose you can say no questions on that, I suppose. But yeah, it's just, when you've got a chairman who, I'm trying to think of the times he communicates. It's once a year in the chairman's message, and there's another short little message when he does the financial statement. But these are written words. We don't know how many times, how many pairs of eyes and hands these go through before they hit the page. And, you've heard me say it before, Spurs don't explain the decisions they make, even the ones that infuriate everyone the most. I don't get it. I don't get it. I never would. I don't understand. So for me, when they finally got someone that was confident in speaking in public and explaining major football decisions, just didn't use him at all. And I know this all sounds a bit weird now, having known the verdict that came out tonight and all that, but I'm sorry, but you still could have used him in that regard. Yeah, it's just ironic, you know. There's almost like a distrust of the media, but in turn, that distrust of the media has actually resulted in a distrust of the people at the top of the club. I don't get it. I don't get why there's not more, what's the word? Transparency in the way they talk about stuff. And I said this before as well, but I'm sure there was certainly once I can remember when Levy sat down with Poch to do like a fans forum type event. Why don't they do just stuff like that? Yes, he's going to get a bit of flack, but just try to explain some of the baffling things that happen at Tottenham Hotspur. Just try to. I think you'll find there's more positive than negative comes out of it. But yeah, that's Tottenham. Honestly, they're always bewildering me. They always are, and they always probably will. But like I say, Conte looked knackered. He looked like a man that was experiencing Tottenham. He was rubbing his eyes. He was doing this to his temples at one point. I mean, that's probably what people just do when they're answering questions from me. He was trying to explain this performance, trying to defend the defending, which is pretty much inexcusable, some of it. And then to top things off, late night flight back on Thursday night, early hours of Friday morning to come back to London, Enfield. And then he has to get up bright and early this morning to do his press conference because they brilliantly scheduled a 12 hours later press conference after his last press conference, which most of us regulars that had gone to Manchester, I think everyone that went to Manchester then couldn't do the next press conference. I was on the train at the time, so I was sent all the audio and had to transcribe it with a couple of the others. Yeah, very strange. Yeah, very weird. I think it's all to do with schedules and things like that. But yeah, 10 a.m. the morning after a night match in Manchester is just a bit weird. So yeah, understandable it was a bit knackered. But what we did get is we got the old Conte mixed messages, which wasn't great. In terms of things he was saying on Thursday night weren't exactly the same kind of things he was saying on Friday morning. And the reason I say that is I just think it just confuses everyone. It confuses us as journalists exactly what we're meant to write about him and his future. And I think it confuses the fans about knowing whether he really intends to be at the club next season. I think that makes it awkward. And maybe that transfers to the players as well. I don't know. I can't really get into their heads. But it all feels very deja vu-like to last season. Towards the end when he was like talking about having to make a decision in the best interests of everyone and all this. It's a bit like, oh, come on. I mean, he ended up staying last summer. So just to put this, to explain it exactly. So last night, he was asked whether this was his most difficult season as a manager, having been at clubs that obviously have challenged at the top, but on top of that, having lost 3 friends really tragically in recent months as well. So this is what his response was to that. I think that we have to try to understand that we're talking about 2 different situations. For sure, under the personal aspect, it's a difficult season for what happened. But now this situation is not important. This situation is my personal situation, and then will be the time to make the right decision for me, for the future, for my family. But this situation doesn't affect the work and doesn't affect the team. I'm really focused about this aspect. I'm an animal because I'm really focused. So that's that bit, talking about decision again at the end of the season. It's kind of, I don't want to say latched on because that's not fair, because clearly it is something that's not perfect, having his family back in Italy while his daughter's at school. But he has kind of, every time he's been asked about it, he has very much used that as saying that's going to be part of his decision making at the end of this season. When he was talking about the difference in the clubs he's been at to this one as well, and the different season that brings, he said, for sure, if you tell me about my previous experience with Inter, Chelsea and Juventus, but also with Siena and Bari, yeah, they're different situations. When you understand very well what is the situation, you realise and you go with it with more strength. You understand. You understand? You can tell I'm knackered. It's logical if my expectations continue to be the same at Juventus and Inter, then maybe it could be dangerous because my frustration could be big. I think he means here at Spurs. Instead, I know what is my task in this situation, and then I'm working very hard because I want to improve. I want to improve the team and the club with my vision, with my idea, with my suggestions. Then for sure, we see. I'm totally into the new situation and know that my task is to be part of this process and try to, with a team in transition, to start to become solid and to build a solid foundation and try to build a team ready to fight to win. So then 12 hours later, he was very much talking about the whole patience long-term aspect. And he's saying, honestly, yes, for sure. When you're used to winning many, many games and to lose 3 or 4 games in one season, this could be frustrating. Honestly, I have to tell you, last season when it happened in a part of the season like this, especially when we lost 3 games in 14 days against Chelsea, but I think a clever person, a smart person, an intelligent person, that's 3 different people, has to understand what is the situation, what is the moment, what can we reach and what we have to do to change the situation. Because I think the situation compared to my past is different. I've always said to you it's different. My task here is to build, to help the club and try again to build a solid foundation and then to improve step by step to become competitive and to fight for something important. I understand this is my take, and in the moment you understand this, then for sure you have to put your heart, your mind, your head to lose some games more than the past because you need a process. You need a process. You need patience, you need time, and this is what I can tell you. Only this, but without recrimination or trying to be offensive for something. Only then I know that my way is only one way, to work hard and to try to transfer my mentality to the players. The players are doing everything to try to improve themselves, but I know that we need time to improve this process and to become stronger than now. It's all those buzzwords, isn't it? Time, patience, progress. And that's all well and good as long as Conte has the time and he shows the patience and he makes the progress along with Tottenham. And he's just never entirely convinced that he's going to be. Look, I just want to make it clear, that sounds like I'm putting it on Conte. It's not. As I said, there's an element of Conte that there's little things he does that I do wish he'd do in a different way. But this is also on Daniel Levy. Daniel Levy very much appointed a manager that he knew was going to be like this. He knew was going to be vocal, and he knew he was potentially a short-term manager. So there's no kind of getting away from that. Like I say, he knew he was a manager that required a certain level of funding, and this is why he needs to help him. Daniel Levy has to be there for Antonio Conte in the next 11 days. He needs to pull 1 or 2 things out of the hat, preferably 2, I think, as well. Because once again, there were a few chants coming from the travelling fans, against Daniel Levy from the City game. And for me, that's a bigger thing for me than any of the noise on social media, because you'll always hear me absolutely praising the travelling fans that go to all these games, because they are, for me, the heart of the Tottenham fan base. Look, I appreciate the incredible passion from you get across the Spurs fan base and those across the seas, the ones who will get up at 3 a.m. to watch Spurs and things like that. That's incredible. But just for me, those fans that are able, in a position, who will spend thousands, I know the people from far away do as well, but those who are there week in, week out, heading to every game, whether it's on a freezing cold night in, Preston in a couple of weeks' time, or a week's time, if they are grumbling, if they are starting to call on the chairman, you have to listen. You have to, as a club, you have to listen. Like I say, social media can be keyboard warriors. I've seen a lot of that. It's been very unpleasant, social media. There's a lot of people that believe that aggression is the only way to get your point across. It's absolutely not. I can promise you myself and any other journalist, if you're aggressive towards us and unpleasant, one of two things happens. You get muted, so we never see what you say anyway, or you get blocked. And if you get blocked, I'm sure some of them use it as a badge of honour. I mean, there was one guy the other day, I was saying about Anton Walkes and that absolutely tragic news of Anton Walkes passing away. If you weren't aware of Anton Walkes, he was Spurs Academy player, played once for Spurs, I think it was in the League Cup. I feel like he made his debut with Marcus Edwards that night. Was that against Barnsley? I'm trying to remember who it was. Defender. He went on from Spurs to play MLS football for Atlanta, and I think he's at Charlotte. He was honestly the most tragic news that he had a boat as a boat accident, and unfortunately passed away. Only 25 years old. Honestly, absolutely gutting. I think I interviewed him, and this is sounding awful, but it's how many kind of young players and people. I'm pretty sure I interviewed him in his early days, and everyone I spoke to said like what a lovely guy it was. So obviously I tweeted out about that yesterday, and I can't believe it. I can believe it because it's what social media. Someone put underneath should have been Lloris, and honestly, I cannot comprehend people like that. I can't. So I blocked that person, and I just thought to myself, I wonder if he's going to use that as a badge of honour. And I went back into his profile and looked, and there it is. He screenshotted my blocked thing, saying that Alistair Gold's blocked you as a real, like, yeah, kind of thing. And so I just replied, like, with his original tweet, just saying, like, just so your followers know why you were blocked, kind of thing. And sorry, the reason I'm saying that is to go back to the point, is there's a lot of aggression. There's a lot of nastiness out there. People talking to people in a way they would never ever speak to them on the street. Just a really unpleasant way that they would never want to be spoken to themselves. Ridiculous things coming out. And if you don't agree 100% with the way that they're going about things, then you're the problem. And it's very unpleasant. And like I say, I'm sure there's a lot of people shouting things at probably me. I can't hear you. Honestly, if I'm not replying to you, if you're constantly saying unpleasant things, it's probably because I can't see them. The mute button is an incredible thing, honestly. It really, really is. And honestly, I've seen other journalists getting it as well. People just have this very kind of, how do I put this? A sense of how things work. And it's just not how it works at all. It's a strange job we do. It is. So yeah, I'm sorry, but if you're unpleasant, that's just the way it goes. I would absolutely. If anyone follows me on social media, you're very well aware of the way I like to interact, and I will talk to people. And if people talk in a nice way, if they show a real desire to interact, provide evidence, talk through things, discuss things, debate things, that's absolutely fine. The moment you're aggressive and unpleasant, honestly, I think a lot of us just hit that mute button. And that's it. We don't see you again. We do not see you in our lives again. So I'm sorry. It's just the wrong way to go about things. Sorry, bit of a rant there. And I always, every time I do one of these, I'll have someone, ironically, in the comments goes, stop talking about people on social media. It's just like, it just makes you think, oh, maybe you are one of those people that's been muted and you've just realised you might have been muted. But yeah, God, I've really went away from the point. Sorry, it's because it's late and it's about to hit midnight and my brain's frazzled. The point was, when social media is going off, I think maybe clubs can slightly brush that to one side and just think, oh, it's just people writing daft replies on Twitter to everything we put out or something. But when it is the fans, when it's especially, I think, the travelling fans that are there week in, week out for you, showing that incredible loyalty that they can and do. And, you know, sometimes that they are, I know people that not only home and away domestically, they're there in every European game. I see them there. They're there on pre-season tours as well. You know, incredible dedication. So if they are disgruntled and upset, then that's when you've got to fix things. You've got to give them something to kind of grasp back onto. You've got to make them proud of their football club again. And I think that's what's on Daniel Levy and his shoulders has to be for these remaining days. obviously the Paratici stuff is going to be interesting to see how that plays out and how that does affect, if it affects it in any way in these coming days. We'll kind of know more maybe over this weekend. Look, as far as I'm aware, from what I understand, Spurs still intend or hope to bring in a couple of players before the end of, is it 11 o'clock, January 31st. Obviously, looking at Arsenal getting business done, looking at Chelsea just going like, ooh, just ridiculous spending on anything. Even Noni Madueke, the former Spurs guys, kind of Spurs Academy lads, gone there. I don't know if Spurs get anything out of that deal. I've made a couple of inquiries and I haven't anything back yet, but one kind of person I spoke to said because it was an end of contract thing and he went abroad, it lessens the chances that Spurs would have got anything from that. But I'll keep digging away to see even if they've got the tiniest amount as some kind of knock-on thing. But yeah, seeing that those clubs doing their business across the capital and getting it done, I think it just whacks on the pressure even more that Spurs have to do it. They have to get something done. Because, for me, this feels like a critical juncture. It really does. It feels like one of those moments. I think last January was one, and Spurs got it right. So I think they've got to be praised for they did it right. But they've got it wrong in the past. Not least, probably the most notable in my recent memory is those 2 transfer windows they did nothing in. That was unforgivable. For some reason, it's warped into 3 transfer windows when some people talk about it. I'm pretty certain it was 2. It was a 2018-19 season, wasn't it? The January window before that, they got Lucas Moura. And then the transfer window after that was the Tongi, Cess, Lo Celso, Jack Clark windows. I think it was just the 2, but for some reason it's become 3. I don't know why. It was 2's bad enough. 1's bad enough, especially if it's a summer one. But 2 is bad enough. That was disastrous, honestly. That was, look, the Champions League final absolutely papered over the cracks of those 2 transfer windows. Poch had a stagnating squad. You could tell it was stagnating. It needed those 2 windows to revitalise it, refresh it, do whatever you needed to do to it. And I think the club let him down. I think Daniel Levy, whoever you want to call it, they let him down. The money was not spent. Poch was not happy. It was clear at the time. And I think that Champions League final almost served as not only papering over the cracks, but actually kind of the defeat itself in Madrid convinced a lot of that squad that's as good as it was ever going to get, especially when you're coming off of 2 windows where nothing's been spent whatsoever. Oh, honestly, it was so disastrous, that window. And then they took their time as well. They got Tongi, but then they took their time in that next summer window as well, and Poch was getting so wound up by it. And this feels like another one of those stick or twist moments for me. Don't be that Tottenham Hotspur. Don't be that Daniel Levy in the board. Be the one of at least last January and bring in 2 players that will, the season will hinge upon. Because if they don't, I think top 4's out of the question. I really do. I think, but if they bring in enough players that lifts that, you just want to lift everything, don't you? If you get in a couple of players, it lifts the mood of everyone. It lifts Conte's mood. He's got a better chance of succeeding. It lifts the mood of people like Harry Kane. It gives him more of a chance to score more goals. Obviously, we've seen the links with Man U today, and I have no doubt that Man U would like him. I'm not entirely sure how he fits in a Ten Hag system, whether he hasn't, I don't know if he's got the pace quite for a central striker in Ten Hag's system, but look, it's Harry Kane. He's going to go anywhere and score a ridiculous amount of goals and be able to be your number 10 and number 9. I think United would still have to pay a fair old whack of money. I've seen the 85 million price tag, but I wouldn't be shocked if that's more for English clubs next summer. But again, I said it last week. If I'm Harry Kane, I don't really forgive Harry Kane. I wouldn't hold it against Harry Kane because he's given everything for this club. He really has. And they've just dragged him along behind them in the dust almost as he's tried to help them at every turn. They've never really met his ambitions. So, yeah, it's a really difficult one. It is. But, like I say, improve the mood, improve the morale, and I think it's a very different Tottenham Hotspur suddenly for the second half of the season as well. You know, you've got to persuade him to want to stick around for longer. Give him something to hang on to, because I think that's all he needs. I think he would stick around if he believed that he was going to win something. It's just that lack of belief, I think, with Spurs, isn't it? You know, if Conte decided to stick around, then yeah, I guess that shows the ambition that maybe he believes that next season would be something. But they need that encouragement. They need the belief that the club is going to spend the kind of money that other clubs are spending right now, especially with the cash that stadium is now going to start generating. Don't even start me going down there. But there you go. And also with Conte, you know, when he talks about, you know, I think with Conte it's going to be whether there's a better offer for him in the summer. And at this moment, I can't see what that better offer is going to be. So there's the potential in that respect that unless he wants a sabbatical because of family stuff, but I don't know. Do I see Conte as the kind of guy to take a sabbatical? Obviously, he took a fair chunk of time off after the Inter job before getting into it till November. And I kind of got the sense from everything he said that he was desperate to get back into football. So, yeah, I don't know about that. I don't know whether he would. So, yeah, we'll see how it all works out in that regard. But for me, I mean, the alternative I guess Spurs could go down is the whole take stock, be worried about signing new players that maybe would only fit Conte and then be lumbered with them in the next transfer. Sorry, lumbered with them if there's another manager comes in. I guess that's one way to look at it. I just don't think Spurs can afford to look at it that way. I just don't think they can. Because if you look at the fixtures as well, after that return match against City at home, the fixtures really open up for Spurs. They play a lot of teams in the lower half of the table, quite a few of the bottom six teams. It almost goes all the way up to April, like early April. There's some really good run of games. Obviously, you've got Chelsea at home, and Chelsea will see what they become. But right now, that's definitely not the daunting prospect it was. And honestly, I think there's a big chance Spurs, if they do the right things in these 11 days, coupled with, you know, good signings, get Conte back in a happy place or a less knackered place, get everyone firing again. With these fixtures, you can build some momentum, and who knows what the end of this season can bring. You know, you've still got the FA Cup to go for. They've proved in the Champions League, if they can get momentum going, they can go all the way to the final. And of course, you know, you've got the top four there as well. And maybe if Newcastle were to start dropping away, maybe you can even look at third. But they've got a long way to go first before you can even start thinking of any of these things. They need to sign players. Look, Pedro Porro, of course, we know that he's one of the main targets that they want. They'll continue to try getting him. And I'd say I'm probably more hopeful than I was earlier in the window. About Porro. Look, they're still trying to compromise around this release clause. I've said this before, and I know people don't like it, but not many clubs like to pay the full whack up front, and that's what a release clause does. I wouldn't be shocked if Spurs were to agree a fee for Porro. It would eventually encompass more in total than the release clause is worth. I wouldn't be shocked, and that's what I'm saying. It's almost like a lot of teams would rather do these things in bits. You know, I've seen some of the ideas from Portugal that have been floated around, like a player exchanged, potentially Marcus Edwards 50%. It's about 45% sell-on clause cashed in, as it were, as well. So there's many ways they can do it. Of course, he, for me, kind of falls in that Kulusevski range of a player who is only young. He's 23, but he's got a lot of experience. Kulusevski obviously was 21 when he signed, but, you know, he's played 111 games in Liga Portugal, La Liga. He's played across 2 different leagues. Obviously, he was at Man City as well, although I don't think he ever played a game for Man City. I don't think. As well. So he kind of ticks that box for me of a young player that actually is a player that the club have tracked for a couple of years before Conte as well. So he fits their profile, but actually is the kind of player that could unlock Conte's system and he could work with him. And rather than poor old Jed Spence, who's really been dispensed as a I don't actually mean that. It works. As a player who, he's only played in the Championship, kind of thing for Conte. Whereas he can't really deny with Porro that he's played 111 games across 2 major leagues. He's played 2 seasons in the Champions League as well. He's got a lot of experience under his belt. And honestly, a bit like Spence, he's a player that can make their system work. So you've got to really try and get that done. Obviously, if they do, they're going to have to kind of convince him of Royale presumably have to be the one that, you're not going to get a lot of game time. So you're going to have to really head out the door. Obviously, there's been interest in him from Spain and Italy. Jed Spence as well. I understand there's interest from him. Obviously, Bayer Leverkusen, Germany, we've spoken about before. In the Premier League, Palace, Southampton and West Ham, I understand, have all shown an interest in him as well. And of course, like I said, Spurs need another attacker as well to plug this gap left by Lucas Moura's injury imposed absence as well. And again, as I've said before, upgrades in central defence, central midfield, and a long-term successor for Hugo Lloris are all summer plans. But if in his last few days an opportunity to bring in someone that they would have likely gone for in the summer comes in the next 11 days, well, it'll be 10 days by the time most of you are watching this, because it's now past midnight and this is going to take an age to upload, then you'd think they'll move those plans forward to make sure they get their man. So, please be excited. Please, after the mess that has been recent weeks, please give us something. Me, something nice to talk about, and you all something to enjoy. Like I say, a right back will make Conte's system really work. A right wing back if he gets it right. Attacker to bolster the options. Honestly, I think it'll put Spurs back on track, allied with these run of fixtures that they've got coming up. For me, for Tottenham, for Levy, for Conte, it's time to think about the now, not the future. Don't worry if Conte is going to be here next season. Don't worry about potential things with Harry Kane. Don't worry about concerns over getting lumbered with players that you might not. This is something that Spurs have always done. If you go through as many managers as Spurs do, you're always going to get lumbered with players that your next manager doesn't want. Just go for the now. Go for it, honestly. Because you could surprise yourself and end up with Champions League football. That pays you back money-wise, absolutely. You get all your money back pretty much with that, if you're looking at it from a financial perspective. But just give the fans some happiness, and like Nuno tried, make them proud again. Honestly, please actually make them proud rather than just words. Honestly, be better, Tottenham Hotspur. Right, I'm going to head off now. It is 7 minutes past midnight. So whenever you watch this, please think of me that I was doing this so late at night while waiting for a statement from Tottenham that never came. But there you go. Right, I will head off now. As always, stay healthy, stay safe, look after yourselves. And I shall catch you after the Fulham game. So maybe Tuesday. Yeah, I shall catch you then. Goodbye.